get it popping. Week 2, welcome back to the process. Time to continue the process where we learn, scout, win, and repeat. I'm your host, Ralph. Time to get into it. First thing we're going to do is reflect on last week. Guys, we gained some information by watching these games. I gained some information, so you guys gained some information. We do not need to rewrite the script. We don't need to rewrite the strategy. All we want to do is assess what we saw and use that information and move forward. And that's what we're going to do here. Welcome in if you're new to the show, to the podcast. If you are new, we got a couple of powerful segments that'll get you ready for DFS or get you ready for season long this week. But if you are a repeat offender, welcome back. I love a hard head. We have a little bit of data is what we've been discussing about last week, but we're not going to transform our opinions on every team. We're just going to continue to collect that data. Now, before we hop into week 2, we do need to talk about results from week 1 on the DFS side. So for cash games, did not hit that cash game lineup mark. Was 6 points shy. That's not a lot. We could make that up this week. In week 1, I know a lot of the sentiment is, well, nobody really knows anything. We're feeling it out, but we still want to win, right? So from that perspective, definitely a 1-1 because we didn't, bring back the cash game glory that we want. However, 6 points, we can make that up. The information that we saw last week will help us to make that up. And so we'll get back on the horse this week and do better, fully expecting that. On the tournament side of things, not a bad showing. Not a bad showing at all. Didn't win a tournament. We came close in a couple of scenarios. There's a DraftKings contest I like to play. It's a 25-cent entry, but it's $500, winner take all, like 2,300 people. We nearly took that thing down. But that's the kind of progress we want to see out the gate from week 1. Can we push the issue, find the lineup, identify a lineup that can score 150 to 176 points, right? You need 170-something points to cash in the lock contest on DraftKings. 200 points to get you pretty much any contest, right? So move the needle in that aspect. We will move the needle for the double-ups this week. We're ready. We got the information we need. So we're locked and loaded there. And essentially, we're going to do what we do every week, guys. Learn, scout, win, repeat. Let's hop into it. First segment, let's get it going with Would You Rather. Would you rather, as promised, we're going to take a look at the defenses this week. Usually we do like a flex sort of a deal or whatever, but I think it will be helpful for everybody, whether you're playing seasonal or whether you're playing DFS. Take a look at these streaming defenses. A lot of us do it. For DFS, you have to. For season long, a lot of people draft defense last, or maybe not even, and then just pick one up or try to stream. So this is very prevalent for us all. So we're going to do Would You Rather based off that. Arizona Cardinals first up, or the 49ers. Cardinals are playing the Panthers, and the 49ers have the Saints this week. We saw these Cardinals play these same Saints. Let's keep picking on the Saints. The Panthers aren't a great team either, but I think they're a little bit more of a complete team than the Saints are, who I think are rudderless for sure. Bryce Young maybe a little bit better at quarterback, than the kid they have in New Orleans, but I don't think it's by much, right? But as a whole, there's a new staff there. They're just trying to figure it out. It's really gutted at the end of last year. Like Dennis Allen was a great defensive coach. He's not there anymore, right? They don't have a lot of talent on that side of the ball either. So for a lot of reasons, I think continuing to invest in, thinking about should we pick on the Saints is probably a good idea. So between the Cards and the Niners this week, I'm going to take the 49ers defense. Buffalo Bills are the Detroit Lions. So the Bills are going to play the Jets this week, and the Lions have the Bears. There's a lot of familiarity with the Bears and the Lions. A lot of, the staff has come over with Ben Johnson. This is the coming home game for him, right? And so I'm reticent to talk about what I know will happen because there's too much familiarity there. Familiarity does contend to the NFL. I think these guys will have a feel for what each side wants to do, meaning, the Lions and the Bears, Ben Johnson's Lions, and blanking on the coach in Detroit. We all know who we're talking about. But, there's a lot of familiarity there is the point. And so I think they're going to be better prepared. So would I say the Lions defense is going to shut down, the offense of the Bears because they know who Ben Johnson is? I don't know. He knows that they know who he is. So I expect there's going to be some wrinkles there, right? And so we want to kind of, not get too bold and say, we know. I don't think there's any analysts out there that's can accurately say which of those sides is going to be, you know, I guess have a better or have the edge over the other, right? And so maybe stay away from that. Now let's go to the Bills. Bills are playing the Jets. Yeah, we saw the Jets put some points up last week, and actually they're pretty heavily inflated now in a lot of people's eyes, wrongfully so. We know who they are. They're not what people think, but they're not as bad as what people thought at the start of the year. They're somewhere in the middle. Now, for our purposes for defense, we should play the Bills because the Jets are that type of team that can turn the ball over. Bills can turn the ball over, right? You can have these dynamic positive plays, but they can be dynamic negative plays too. And so I think the opportunity persists for Buffalo to come away with more points from a defensive standpoint. So we'll take it. All right, moving on, New England Patriots this week, or the San Francisco 49ers. Patriots have the Dolphins, 49ers going against the Saints. The Dolphins are not a great team. There's definitely some issues there. Saying it as a Dolphins fan, but we need to keep making life, in these NFL contests simple for ourselves. And what that means this week is pick on the Saints if it comes down to Niners versus Patriots. Let's take the sort of matchup that we can invest more in for the reasons we just mentioned. All right, moving on. Dallas Cowboys or the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers have the Seahawks this week. This is going to be a nice little revenge sort of game for Metcalf. But I like the Steelers defense. They're a tough unit. I'm not going to hold what the Jets did against them, especially if some of it was garbage time. But that's a pretty decent unit. I think they can have a better week this week versus the Seahawks, who don't have as dynamic of a quarterback back there in Case Keenum, right? And so we need to temper our expectations. This is not a mobile guy. So you kind of got to be standing still back there. What things I like about the Steelers defense this week. On the other side of the ball, Dallas Cowboys, this is a winnable game for them. Their defense should be able to do this. But again, there's this aspect of the rivalry. Like, these are divisional foes, so they see each other twice a year. The Giants going to have more of a concept of how to beat this team than the team that doesn't see them 2 times a year. That is just the way it goes, right? The more exposure, we know more value, we can better defend your offense, essentially. And so, do I expect Dallas to win? Do I want to play a lot of Cowboys this week? Sure, I do. But from a defensive standpoint, if I'm looking for sheer points, I think the Steelers over the Cowboys in this scenario this week. The Steelers, I think, can force Seattle into some bad plays in Pittsburgh there. And I'd be counting on that a little bit more than this divisional thing with the Cowboys and the Giants. All right. Minnesota Vikings and the Rams. The Vikings are playing the Falcons this week, and the Rams have the Titans. Again, these are 2 not great teams, but of the 2, we need to focus on the worst, right? And that's going to be the Titans. You have Cam Ward playing quarterback. It's a new guy, it's a rookie. There's going to be a lot of deficiencies there. We know it. And so let's invest in the easier path, which would be the Rams. So that's something we want to think about this week as we look forward to DFS as well. They're only $3,100, so I'll put them in liberally when I can. All right, 49ers defense versus the Saints, or the Rams versus the Titans. I would take the Titans here, the Rams versus the Titans here. Again, we talked about the Saints and how bad they are, but the easiest path is the one we should always pick. Rookie QB, Tennessee, they don't have a lot established, right? And so they're still trying to figure out their identity, who they are. Second-year coach, the team hasn't really gelled. You guys can see that, right? So let's go ahead and pick on them with the Rams. Arizona Cardinals, again, going against those Panthers, or the Eagles taking on Mahomes and the Chiefs. Mahomes and the Chiefs can put up some points. We'll talk about that and reload, but I don't want to necessarily go target them, even with the defense as good as the Eagles. They're getting Jalen Carter back. Let's take the path of least resistance. That's going to be the Cardinals versus the Panthers in this one. In that Philly-style defense that the Cardinals have. That should play well versus these Panthers. I'll take the Cards in that scenario. All right, middle column, bottom row. Vikings or Chargers defense. Of these 2, Chargers had the Raiders this week, and the Vikings had the Falcons. Geno Smith looked pretty decent considering that team had to travel east as a West Coast team trying to play that game at what feels like 10 a.m. to your body. That's not easy to do, right? But he didn't look terrible. They're a more complete team than the Falcons are. There's going to be growing pains with Penix. No matter how much they try to shield and hide him, I would take the Vikings here. That's the path of least resistance defensively this week. Because we can expect the Raiders to have some success on offense. They have some bright spots with their team. As far as the Falcons go, we'll talk about it in reload, but there's a key injury that's going to be holding this team back, so we need to pick on Vikings. All right, Bills taking on the Jets, or the Steelers taking on the Seahawks. Steelers played the Jets last week. So I think in this scenario, we want to take the Bills because, again, could the Jets have success? We saw what the Jets did to the Steelers. Really should. But the other side of that is there could be turnovers, right? That could happen also. I expect Seattle to take care of the ball a little more. I think there's going to be opportunities for bigger plays on defense for the team playing the Jets. So I'm going to take that, chance and go with Buffalo in this scenario. But Pittsburgh's not a bad choice here. That's a safer choice. Buffalo could be that more higher profile choice that pays off. All right, Cardinals versus the Panthers or Cowboys versus the Giants. I'm going to take the Cardinals defense. Again, this is a unit that should be getting better. Rich Gannon, who's the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, understands what they want to do to help build that defense into what it is. Obviously, they have, Fangio now, but he was an architect of that, which is how he got this job in Arizona. He brings over Montez Sweat. They paid him in the offseason. They're beginning to put together the staples of what they need to have Philly West, right, out there in Arizona. But defensively, that team should be able to it's a nice matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, in my opinion. Whereas, again, as I said, the Cowboys got that divisional rivalry. It's always a chance your division rival shows up. They just see so much. On the Buffalo or the Eagles, and again, the Eagles playing the Chiefs, don't necessarily want to attack them if I don't have to. I'll take Buffalo against those Jets and hope for some turnovers. And finally, do I want the Eagles defense versus the Kansas City Chiefs, or would I take the Niners over the Saints? You better believe we're going to take the Niners defense right there and make our life easy. So that's the moral of the story for Would You Rather this week. Let's take the path of least resistance. And I hope that is helping you guys determine which defenses you're going to roll with and roll off this week. Hey, is your company looking to make a new hire? Are you looking to bring on a new member of your team? Do you guys need to bring on a chief marketing officer? Maybe your company is building out new features to your application that you have, and you need an AI developer, or you need a certain engineer. You guys should look at Fraction. Fraction gives you access to senior level individuals over 7+ years experience in their verticals who can help you with such projects. You can go to fraction.work and get a sense of pricing, actually take a look at the talent pool with profiles that are actually real people in the pool waiting to serve you. Fraction helps you complete your projects in a couple of different ways. You can secure time from these senior level professionals on a monthly basis and pay Fraction for it. Or you can go down the road of productivity-based pricing and complete your project by only paying for completed steps and efforts. Again, if your company is looking to bring on some new talent, why not hire the people who are already working? That's where the best talent is. Visit fraction.work for your hiring needs today. Reach out to that team. All right, we're ready to keep the party moving with a little bit of reload this week. Let's dive right in. We got a bunch of info to cover. Start with Commanders and Packers on Thursday. Moral of the story, couple more of the story here. As far as Commanders go, look, there's film on Jaden Daniels. Teams have film. That's the way the NFL goes. And in that second year, once they've had a chance to take a look at you, there's going to be adjustments, right? And so we're going to have to see, will Jaden Daniels have that sophomore slump, or was it just a bad week? Can they overcome that? Sort of a deal, right? And so that's the thing we'll be paying attention for in Washington, because, as I said, there's tape on you now. And so we're going to have to see who is better. Do these teams game plan for him better, or has Washington thought a step ahead, if you will? But the Packers D is the other story here. This is a defensive unit that was rounding into itself last year. They lost that divisional game against the Philadelphia Eagles, but the Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. They only put 22 points up on the Packers. And since then, they've added Michael Parsons. So this is the unit that's only going to continue to get better. they played well on Thursday. That's the takeaway here against what we saw was a great Commanders offense last year. I think Thursday is less about the Commanders not being ready and more about Green Bay having a good unit that is only getting better with this new addition. Also, we need to keep an eye on Cliff Kingsbury. Is he going to be able to make adjustments and keep his guys in the proper position to win games as the OC there in Washington? Saw a lot of same routes, a lot of familiar routes that we would see back in Arizona. So it's kind of like, where have you improved or where have you tweaked that you're just going to run the same thing? If I can see it, NFL coaches can see it. And can you use Devo Samuel? I would be so upset if you can't, because this is the guy that you saw twice a year in your division. You know the plays that they would use against you. You have to be imaginable. You have to be able to think that up and drum up something on your own. If you can, I would wonder what that hire is for. Those are my takeaways from the Thursday game. And now we roll right into Sunday with the Patriots at the Dolphins. Look, the Patriots are a better team at this point. Diggs, Hunter Henry, Ramondre Stevenson, all interesting for tournament plays for me this weekend. And yes, it's Stevenson over Henderson, the rookie. I know he had more yards on Sunday, but if you look at the touches, it was more touches for Ramondre Stevenson. I think 2 more touches. He's still getting the lead guy, so I expect that to sort of shine through more this week. But those are the guys for the Patriots for me. My Finns just don't have a lot of playmakers on defense, and the Pats actually have someone that can hurt them at every level. Man to man is probably going to create some issues for whoever is on Diggs, but the Pats can bring it back with Hunter Henry against those zones, and of course, pepper in the run. On the other side of things, Achan is the only thing we should trust for the Finns this week. If the O-line can't give Tua time, it's going to be a long day for the Miami offense. This unit was overmatched last week, period. And perhaps will be again this week. This will be a close, low-scoring affair, and I expect the Patriots to steal this one away in South Florida. Reload. Bears at Lions. Bears lost on Monday because the second half adjustments were virtually non-existent. Tale of two halves for both of these teams, essentially. Consistency is the Bears' biggest opponent out of the gate because they're going to be flashes of brilliance for sure. Now, all that said, let's temper our expectations this week. Ben Johnson returning to Detroit, as I said. They know who this guy is. They know his plays. They know his adjustments, all of it. Of course, you put in a few new wrinkles. But the Lions have faced Ben Johnson's offense in practice, as I said, for years now. And the Bears are just 2 weeks into running it. I do not want to fool around with that scenario. For seasonal, roll your Bears out. And for DFS, I'll try to find my points elsewhere this week. There is too much familiarity here with the two-club staff. I will give the edge to the Lions here. I think they find a way to establish the run, and that will be the difference in this one. But DJ Moore is too lowly priced on DFS this week, and so they're begging us to use him. I'll probably put him in the catch game. Reload. Rams at Titans. So I watched the Rams and Texans game a couple of times last week, just really trying to figure out where I went wrong in thinking that the Texans would get that W and that they were the better club. Well, to some degree, I still think the Texans are a better club than the Rams, but it's undeniable that the Rams won that game at the line of scrimmage. Houston's offensive line is sus AF. LA dominated up front on the defensive side of the ball, and that was basically the difference last week. I say all that because the Titans have a terrible O-line. Coaching and scheme are not the issue. There is no one more qualified than Bill Callahan to coach offensive line. The Titans are lucky to have that guy. Came over to help his kid out and be on staff. His son is the head coach there now. But the talent on the line is not solidified, and they have not added much, and they seem to continue to have issues last week. And on top of all that, they have a rookie QB in Cam Ward, so he's going to have bad tendencies like holding the ball too long, stuff like that. That's going to cause issues for the O-line. Rams win this game easily because of the work up front along the line. I like Kyron Williams and Puka. I have I will have Devontae Adams, I guess, a little bit of an exposure, but I'm not crazy about it. I think you maybe just stick to Puka, but Rams D is a solid DFS play in that one. Reload on the Jaguars and Bengals. The way to attack the Jaguars is through the air, but I think that will set up the run. They can run a true West Coast offense like they profess to have anyway, the Bengals, where we use short passes to set up the run. Jamar Chase is a lock and a lead for me. Higgins is seasonal for sure. Tournaments also, but also Chase Brown for the West Coast offense aspect. He could hit pay dirt easily. Bengals O line is terrible. We know Burrow will hold the ball too long still, but this week they can overcome those things a little easier versus this outfit out of Jacksonville. Now, on the other side of the ball, Tank Bigsby has been shipped to Philadelphia, which we'll address later, but Tootin is still relevant. They believe in him so much so that they traded Tank. Read the room for crying out loud. So I won't be bullish on Etienne, and I also expect Jacksonville to be trailing and therefore passing more. Bengals defense isn't great. For playing Lawrence makes sense. I think for tournaments this week, Brian Thomas feels more like a locked in cash game sort of a play. But I think the Bengals win convincingly at home versus an inferior club. Reload, Browns at the Ravens. I do not envision a world where the Browns win this game, or even successful with a ton of garbage time production. We can get away with Sampson and Njoku. Deep tournament play would be a pairing of Flacco and Tillman. Rams, D is in a good spot, but I don't necessarily think we need to pay for that in DFS this week with the emergence of cheaper, more prevalent options this week for defense. Now, the Browns have a good pass rush, and that will limit Lamar's effectiveness. So I've tempered my expectations this week, but Mark Andrews is in a good spot, especially with Likely out. I like the run game this week for Baltimore, but I expect Henry to share that load. And if the Ravens are ahead enough late to completely cede touches altogether with Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell or whoever, Ravens reload. Bills at the Jets. So week one, the Bills and the Ravens both put up some points, but it is important to watch the game, rewatch the game, and watch highlights to see was it bad defense or good offense. It was good offense by both teams last week. I say that to underscore that both the Bills and the Ravens have better defenses than folks imagine right now. Recency bias is a killer. The Jets are not going to have their way with this defense. Pittsburgh is imagined to have a stellar D. So now folks are riding the belief that the Jets are world beaters on offense, and that's just not true. Just like Baltimore, the Jets have a good mobile QB and a powerful runner, but the way that they use it will not be the same as how the Ravens offense operates. Brees Hall is in a good spot, and his production will open up play action, which will, keep Buffalo honest. But Garrett Wilson and Fields for seasonal, but for DFS, too many people going there for production, I think, this week. And we can get that elsewhere, basically, on this slate and avoid, falling in with the chalk in terms of picking the same guys as a lot of people, which we'll talk about in housekeeping. But I like the Bills' run game against these Jets. Also, Pittsburgh used the right strategy against this defense last week, which we outlined correctly last week, with the one caveat being Caleb Johnson fits better, in my opinion, than Warren and Gainwell that the Steelers are using. But James Cook can step in and produce this week like Warren and the Steelers did last week with the stress test again being on Quentin Williams in the middle, fighting against design with this wide 9 setup, seeing the ends jut out extremely to the outside of the tackles. When the Jets crash in to help stop the run, then Josh Allen will make them pay over the top. Bills on the road. Reload. 49ers at the Saints. No Purdy or Kittle. Still no Ayuk. And Juwan Jennings is plenty banged up, although still playing. They do have McCaffrey, do the Niners. So, you expect them to lean on him pretty heavily, which is why the Saints should be putting 8 in the box and forcing Mac Jones to beat them. He just doesn't have many reliable weapons, although he probably personally is not that big of a dip down from Purdy, to be honest, for me. But yeah, if you're the Saints, you can't let one man beat you. So they figure to be game planning on neutralizing McCaffrey in this one. Niners D is in a good spot. The Saints offense offers no bright spots for me that I can see. Olave is fine for seasonal, DFS tournaments. Okay, he can live off of targets and garbage time production this week. I don't want anything else from New Orleans though. I'll pay for the Niners defense in DFS this week in a game that they should be able to steal in New Orleans. Reload Giants and Cowboys. The Cowboys have two good corners, and we saw them pretty much neutralize A.J. Brown. One reception for 8 yards, and Devontae Smith, 3 receptions for 16 yards. So I don't have high hopes for Russ in the passing game this week. Now, Tyrone Tracy, is perhaps the one Giant that I do want to get exposure to this week. Season long, you're playing Malik Neighbors. We just don't need to target him in DFS. Javonte Williams will probably be fine because of his goal line work. Seasonal only for me, though, this week. And Lamb is in the slot, and he's more intriguing to me this week versus Pickens on the outside. Giants not that bad on the outside and deep coverage. It is their whole thing. They don't want to get burned deep, so there's a focus on making the offense take what's under, keep everything in front of the defense, and defend hard over the top. And that is exactly good for Lamb. I'll take the Cowboys at home. Reload and Seahawks and Steelers. The Seahawks would need to establish the run to set the tone here. I know we missed on Kenneth Walker last week, but I want to go right back there. I'm not buying the split or emergence of Charbonnet. Not to take anything away from him, but Walker is better, and I expect him to come out and come on more and more as the season progresses here. Even for DFS, I'll go right back there this week, though. Not really thinking about attacking the Steelers via the passing game. DK Metcalf playing his former team that traded him away is intriguing, but I'm not overly excited for that exposure either. Defense and running the ball will be paramount for Pittsburgh this week here, but I expect them to find some success in the air also. Jonnu Smith definitely in play for me. We're still seeing what this offense looks like with Aaron Rodgers, so I won't pretend to know how they distribute the ball this week, but I do think Steelers win it. Reload. Broncos at the Colts. Bo Nix did not look great last week, and we saw a tougher, closer game against the Titans. Look, Denver was supposed to be light years ahead of Tennessee, and we saw a bit of what could very well be the sophomore slump for Nix last week. He's got to be better. J.K. Dobbins is a nice spot here, and the Broncos should be thinking about helping their QB out, by leaning on the run game a little bit. So on the other side, I do like Jonathan Taylor this week as well, and would rather not attack either team in the air for what it's worth. Now I'm going to take the Colts at home here in this one. Reload. Panthers at the Cardinals. I just can't see the Panthers offense having a ton of success versus the Cards. The defense is looking for the Cardinals middle of the pack at worst. So I don't want to attack with Carolina. Maybe Xavier Legette is a deep tournament play. He's only 3,900 this week on DraftKings. Chuba Hubbard and seasonal is fine, but on the other side, play your Cardinals. They'd be more like cash game plays since they should have decent floors but low ceilings because we don't expect them to need to do much to win this game, so the ceilings can't be too high. Cards at home. Reload. Eagles at the Chiefs. Heavyweight battle here. We get our Super Bowl rematch in week 2 in Kansas City. One thing we learned in week 1, the Chiefs defense does not look great. We should be firing up Hurts, Brown, Devontae Smith. All these guys are in play. Saquon Barkley is always in play when he plays. The Chiefs can score. That we also know. Their offense gets a boost for me because their defense doesn't look great. The need for scoring will be there as the Eagles can definitely throttle them and force the issue. Mahomes, Hollywood Brown, these guys are in play. Juju Smith-Schuster for me. Mahomes will pepper it around a little bit. But with Jalen Carter back this week, I don't foresee a lot of room on the ground for Kansas City. Right now, the Eagles are the better team, but this is as tough as it gets on the road here in Kansas City. I'm going to take the Chiefs to find a way to come away with the W at home. Reload. Falcons at the Vikings. J.J. McCarthy has a good chance to have another week of growth here. The opponent this week is not as tough as the last guys were on defense, and he still won that game. This is also in Minnesota, as opposed to being on the road. I look for the Vikings to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. I also expect to see the defense to show well here at home and help make life easier for their offense. The Falcons need to establish the run, but I don't think they're going to be able to do it. They don't have Drake London this weekend, so I don't have confidence in Kyle Pitts to step up and be the go-to guy in the passing game. Without that, the Vikings can just focus simply on stopping the run. The Falcons don't have a terrible defense in the sense that I don't see the Vikings just blowing the top off the D a bunch of times. The Falcons D will make Minnesota earn it. They need to move the ball, play the time of possession game, and win the turnover battle. All of which can be done. Vikings at home. Reload. Buccaneers at Texans, your Sunday night game here. The Texans lost the battle up front last week, as stated before, and I fear they might lose again this week. I have the needle pointing down on Nick Chubb in the run game. Pierce also getting touches there, but I just don't see a lot of room this week. Even the passing game was compromised last week because Stroud had no time to throw before defenders were in the backfield. Christian Kirk is out this week, and they continue to miss Tank Dell, does Houston. So this week, we looked at Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins. Both are fine tournament plays, again, for me this week. On the other side of the ball, I don't know that I want to attack the Texans D with Baker. Ibuka looked good last week, but I would wager that it is more of a Mike Evans week this week. Cade Otton could see some red zone targets there and pay off his price. I have tempered expectations for Bucky Irving this week. Texans get the win at home. Final shot. Let's reload and make it good. Chargers at the Raiders. The Raiders will be hard to stop for. The Chargers will be hard to stop for this Vegas defense. Najee Harris is in a nice spot, and we should look for the Chargers to work in more 12 formation or 2 tight end sets this week. Allen and McConkey should see a more shared distribution this week than 6 to 8 targets for each of them as opposed to one dominating. Herbert's upside remains high due to his rushing threat in this Greg Roman offense. The Chargers secondary looks suspect on paper, and last week wasn't exactly great. Expect the Raiders to look for Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers also to play. Jonty should be a bit more involved as he continues to find his way. Very possible he gets some fruitful goal line touches this week, but really his limitations will lie in his ability to get out there and pass po. Can you provide pass protection? If not, you're going to see limited snaps on the field. But the Chargers will find a way to come up with a timely stop or two in this one. I expect them to win this game on the road. And that is your reload segment for this week 2 of action. Want to take a quick moment and shout out those Downey Razorbacks, the AAU Downey Razorbacks. Saturday morning, this morning, had themselves a nice little battle with the Norwalk Saints, and they beat them up 34-0. It was a great job by the Downey Razorbacks. Couple of nice solid plays in there, nice runs in there. We had a couple of great runs. Julius had a good showing today. Also, Zeke had a great showing today. Very proud of these guys. Continue to roll, guys. Get those W's and march forward in your season. Get better every day. Get better every week. Moving right along. Time of the show when we come to our DFS segment, and I'll just throw it on the screen there so you guys can see what I'm looking at this week. So, the idea is that I will have multiple lineups with, these QBs. So it's like I will put, let's say I play 20 lineups, but I only have 6 QBs there, right? So it's like I'm going to do multiple lineups with each guy to fit in all the different combinations that I want. But the ones that you see have a C mark next to them look like cash game options for me this week. I really want to pay down for Dak because I think I can pair him with Lamb and then save myself a lot of money to get in on some of these other key matchups that I really think could be beneficial. So I think this soft pricing in the wide receivers this week, there's a lot of value down there. You got Brown at 6,600. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5,800. You got DJ Moore at 5,600. That's criminal. Devontae Smith in that matchup at 5,600. Hollywood Brown at 5,200. Stephon Diggs 5K. Olave 49K. Tillman 4,300. Juju Smith-Schuster 4K. These are all guys that I expect would be able to produce. Leggett more of a tournament play there, but I want to diversify what my lineups look like by really fitting in everybody on this page. I'm not going to go too far outside of the bounds here, but as you can see, I've got enough to where I should be able to make a couple of different effective lineups to kind of go at it. For those tight ends, again, Jonnu Smith looking good to me. I like Njoku because of the price. I think people will be on him and they'll be looking for Finman or whatever the other guy's name is. I get it. He caught some passes last week, but he's not the guy. Njoku's definitely the guy. Bottom out of the Okonkwo down there at 3,300. So for tournaments, that's a nice salary saver. McBride, up there as a sure thing for sure. But Andrew's in a nice spot too. Those defenses, again, we went over that in the Would You Rather segment. So we've got a couple of options this week. My suggestion to you would be save that defense slot last, mix and match your team however you want, and just recognize that I've given you defenses at a couple of different price points, expensive, medium, and cheap, right? And so you can kind of go where you need to pretty easily. And the running backs, we want to pay down a little bit. I mean, I like Taylor at the top. I don't think people are going to go there. So I like that for ownership purposes. But also, I want to pay down a little to be able to afford a little bit more firepower in terms of QB and wide receiver this week. But guys, that's what I'm thinking about in terms of my DFS picks for week 2. Finally, let's bring it home with a little bit of housekeeping. Just a couple of notes, nothing too strenuous. As far as seasonal goes, we can't be too squirrely, guys. We got to take it easy. Mentioned it at the top of the show. We want to stand pat right now. Not a lot to do because we just drafted. We invested in this knowledge of the draft, and now we want to back up our belief in our picks by giving them room to breathe. I had a team score 80 points last week, but it also had Amon-Ra St. Brown on a do nothing, A.J. Brown on a do nothing, and I think I had a running back too that we expect also to pop off and did nothing. But it's like, to me, guys in the league are giving me stuff. They're like, hey, your team only scored 80 points, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I had 3 guys basically blank, like 3 really good players. So it's kind of like, Swift was the running back. So it's like Swift, Brown, and St. Brown. It's like, are you guys kidding me? Like, there's never going to be a week where all 3 of those guys blank. You know what I mean? So I got that out the way. I feel good about it. But my point being, we don't have to rock the boat for seasonal. Let's just sort of see where it goes. For DFS, we do need to make some adjustments here. So last week we talked about contest types, tournaments versus cash games, and we talked about multipliers. So you guys understand how you pick a single entry. We need to talk about ownership this week. So quite simply, we want to pay attention when you're in the contest and the contest is live. You can see how many people in that contest actually play the same player as you. We want to avoid the chalk, or that is high ownership, because that means you're picking the same players as everybody else. It's hard to win. Think about 100 people. If we all pick the same lineup, but it's a 50-50, the pool goes down because they have to cash us all out, right? But we all get like less than whatever the promised amount was because they have to keep dividing, right? Think about the one person in that. So 99 people pick the same and one person picks one person different, right? Like, what if it was a tournament? Then that person would win it all, right? What I'm saying is there is a way to separate yourself, and it has to do with ownership. DFS is not only about being right, but it's about being right different from everybody else. And so the chalk only going to get us so far, and really we want to think about that for cash games, the more sure players, the guys that we know we can expect to go off this week, the guys that everybody's thinking are going to have a good week. Those are more serviceable in cash games because we want to hit the guys that we know have a high floor, right? Who's going to perform well this week and hit the line more than 50% of other people. Now, in tournaments, we got to be a little bit more risky. So, again, for ownership, you don't want to be the same as other people. You want to be different because only so many people are going to place in that contest. So, ownership matters a ton. We cannot be anybody in DFS by being the same. And so if you think about two players, like let's say Lamb and let's say Corey Leggett, if they both score 40, which player should you have? You might say it doesn't matter, right? They both scored 40, but it does matter. You would have paid more for Lamb. You could have paid less for Leggett, and Leggett was probably less owned. So you should have played Leggett in that scenario. You could have saved that money and spent it somewhere else and be different somewhere else. So I hope that is making sense to you guys about how important that is. That's how we cash in DFS. That's our show this week. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Good luck as you set your contest, set your lineups for Sunday. Get out there and crush it. And we'll all be right back here. We'll huddle up next week and continue to learn, scout, win, repeat.